Retaliation is never done evenly. There's never an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. It's an eye plus a couple of whiskers. It's a tooth plus the next tooth, just to get even, because retaliation is about getting even, and getting even is requiring a little bit more than you got in the first instance.
Some people just truly don't have any faith in the criminal justice system or police, and they feel the only way in which to deal with a problem is to respond to it directly.
Human beings don't mind a good metaphorical lynching, and we probably always have. And so it was probably always going to happen when something like social media was invented.
1 in 5 Australians aged 16 to 49 have experienced some form of image-based abuse. The key motivations tended to be around trying to get revenge.
Capital punishment is kind of the end of the spectrum in terms of criminal law practice. It allows people some type of psychological comfort. But I think if people actually realised what was involved, they'd take a very different view.
Retaliation is a very interesting reality. If you look around at societies and cultures, every society and every culture that has lasted more than a generation has some way of limiting retaliation. These are often grounded in the religion of the society. They can also be found in secular law. Some way of putting a boundary around it or making it difficult.
Seeing the police as ineffective or uninterested in working with them to resolve a problem is going to increase the odds that someone will then take matters into their own hands. Ideally, when anything involves violence, a third party is absolutely necessary. People who step up to do the right thing, they're taking a risk of potential physical harm.
Doing the right thing is no protection against being pounced upon. And the whistleblower, of course, is probably the best example of that. If I blow the whistle, somebody is going to be affected, and in that context might come back at me.
Whistleblowers essentially are taking the risk of being retaliated against. Once you are retaliated against and gain a reputation of being a traitor, it might be very challenging for you to find the next job in the same sector.
In Australia, the whistleblower is essentially on his or her own. They think they're doing the right thing, and then they get completely the opposite treatment. Rather than being seen as heroes, they're being seen as villains.
What could we do to better protect whistleblowers so that they have the confidence to report the misconduct? From legislation point of view, I think there's still a lot can be done. The existing law is very strict in terms of who are eligible for protection.
The US is a good example there. They have their Corporate Sunshine Act, for instance, whereby if you see something that is wrong in your corporation, you can actually be legally protected for blowing the whistle. There are lots and lots of international examples that we could look at. So the only thing lacking in Australia is political will.
The digital age is really problematic because you've been hurt digitally, and the temptation to simply respond to the whole universe with a response that will hurt the other plus a little bit just to get even. And it's gone. You can't do anything about it. It's terrible.
Social media does now allow for people to visibly and publicly say something wrong, and then other people can react with disgust by also posting on social media, and then that can cause this sort of mushrooming effect where other people jump in with their opinions. People often compare, trial by social media to real trials. And there is some truth in that, because you can suffer, the person who might be the target of a social media campaign can suffer very real consequences. I do regret the way on social media that allegations are often treated as truths.
That leads to this kind of swarm mentality of needing to do something in response to this, very significant problem that they've been led to believe exists. What we just saw recently in St. Kilda with the Nazi salutes and the pro-white responses to immigration, that's generated largely through social media and social media networks.
Another aspect of social media outrage. If someone is filmed on social media doing something terrible, or if they say something terrible, they become sort of reduced to that tweet and they have no other characteristics at all. The reaction can often be that they should lose their job. Losing your job is an important thing. You've lost your livelihood. Do you really need to lose your livelihood because of a stupid tweet? I think social media and the internet generally has probably got us to a point where sticks and stones can break your bones, but words can definitely hurt you.
The Wild West and the lynching mob has really just become a lynching mob on Twitter, and they're lynching with words. Most people think about it as being posted. I posted something on Facebook or I posted it on Instagram. That's right, but that is also a publication, and that is exactly the same in the eyes of the law as a newspaper front page. A 200-person post could be more harmful than a publication to 2 million people, depending on who it's going to and what it says.
Bullying did exist 20 years ago, but the difference between cyberbullying and bullying is that bullying used to take place in schools. Once the school hour finishes, you're at home and it starts the next day. But in cyberbullying is you go back home, you sit on your Facebook, you go on Twitter, so it's 24/7. The most likely to be engaged in cyberbullying would be school kids. There have been serious cases of mental health, and in extreme cases it has ended in suicide, and which is really, really sad. Social media should be more responsible than what they are, because at the moment they say, oh, look, we are just providing this platform, so we are not liable at all. Just like schools have playground, we have a physical space, that physical boundary of the school. This is a virtual boundary, and they should be responsible what happens within their virtual boundary.
Image-based abuse refers to the creation, the distribution, or the threat to distribute a nude or sexual image without a person's consent. It's commonly referred to within the media as revenge porn. Typically, the people who are perpetrating image-based abuse tend to be males, and they tend to be known to the victims. We are seeing more of an increase in stranger perpetrations when it can involve celebrities or high-profile women. There was a case recently in the US where a congresswoman had her photograph manipulated and photoshopped onto a pornographic image. As part of our research, we did see some patterns among people who had engaged in perpetration also being victims of image-based abuse, which would lend itself towards suggesting that there is a pattern of retaliation. Australia is actually one of the leading countries in dealing with image-based abuse criminally. We do have platforms and mechanisms to deal with this. Is that translating into prosecutions? Is it translating into convictions? We're not sure yet, but we are starting to see a trend towards recognising this as a serious criminal issue, which it is, and having responses available.
What attracts people to an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth is fear. It's that it's a way of eradicating a fear, of feeling like we can assert control and we can solve a problem and put away the bad in, they're never going to come back. The people who tend to end up on death row tend to be the people who can't engage or fund a lawyer and who are literally just left there in some cases for years on end to wait for a terrible ending. Opposing the death penalty doesn't mean opposing punishment. It's about having an appropriate punishment for a crime. We know too much now about how to effectively rehabilitate people who commit crime, and we also know that people who commit crime tend to have a lot of other underlying social issues which put them in those circumstances in the first place that need to be addressed. So it's no longer an acceptable way to deal with punishment.
We've gone way past string the bastard up. Stringing him up isn't going to make a difference. Putting him into torture isn't going to make a difference. Isn't going to come out with, as they always say, bring my relative back. No, it isn't. But it also isn't going to address the deep hurt that you've got. That needs to be dealt with differently. Revenge is a porridge best eaten cold. It does cool off.
I think we all forget that our right to express ourselves ends at someone else's right to live free of persecution.
If you are constantly criticising, you are constantly being aggressive and constantly being negative, it can then lead to you going too far and you cross the line and you create a legal problem for yourself.
In reality, the eye for an eye is not nearly as common as it used to be. Our general lust for punishment, almost enjoyment at perhaps sometimes seeing someone punish someone who has done something wrong, that still exists, and I'm not sure if that's ever gone away.